Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The Divorce Couch. My name is Claire, and I'm a divorce coach based in Northern Ireland.
Hi, my name is Salma, and I'm a divorce coach based in London.
Hi, my name is Simone, and I'm the divorce coach based in Germany.
So I hope you have a coffee, pull up a seat. We're today going to talk about that whole area of should I go, should I stay? What happens when you're stuck? Almost like in this country, we have a saying, it's like you're on the hamster wheel and you just go round and round and round and round and round. So that's not a good place to be. It's kind of a place of existing without really living because you're not really making any progress. And sometimes it's because you don't really know how to make a decision. So there's a really good quote by Jim Rohn, who's written lots of books that I just love. And it says, you can't make progress without making decisions. Whatever progress it happens to be, whether you're going on a holiday, whether you're, going on a date, whatever it is, you need to make decisions. And there is a thing that is now a bit of a buzzword called indecision paralysis or decision paralysis. And it's quite an interesting word because sometimes making a decision paralyzes us as humans because of the impact of what we make the decision to mean. And that can keep us very, very stuck. And the reality is, if we're stuck in one area of our lives, we're going to be stuck in lots of areas. It's like if you are really unhappy in your job at work, does it just stay at work and you come home and life is rosy? Of course it doesn't. You're unhappy at work, you come home, you're miserable on a Sunday night because you're thinking of going back to work on a Monday morning. So it impacts your whole life. And not making decisions in this specific area of should I go and should I stay, whether it's a marriage or it's a relationship that you're not married in, has exactly the same implications. One of the things I'd like to start the conversation with is the absolute, I think, solid foundation of the fact that as coaches, we understand really well that we make decisions based on the at any given time. And I think that, I'm going to say this a second time because I think it's really important. We make decisions based on the information we have at any given time. So often I have gone and I've thought, oh, why did I do that? I wish I hadn't done that. And then you go into the regret loop. So you're stuck in a different loop, but you're still stuck. But when I now understand that at the time I made that decision, with the information I had, I made the best choice I could have. That allows me to go, okay, so of course I might make something different now with this information because I now know more, but I didn't know it then. And we're quite hard on ourselves as humans. What do you ladies think? Am I the only one who thinks that, or do you think we're all a bit like that?
Oh, no, I am 100% behind you, right? You know what? I find this very modern way in looking hindsight and what would I've done differently. And then I said, please stop that. Nothing, because you know what? The context was the way it was. So I took the decision with who I was, with all my being into that direction. So I'm 1000% behind you. And I think, you know what, we really should champion that with our client and with our viewers. You know what, at that point of time, it was the context you were in, and that's why you did it. We cannot revisit it. What do you think?
And I think it's just not getting ourselves stuck in a different pattern, because being stuck as humans is something that we're quite familiar with a lot of the time. So indecision will inhibit your progress and your productivity. So if you're in a relationship and you think, oh, I just don't like this, or something's not working, or say you notice something and you think, I actually feel really lonely in this relationship, and you realize that there's something that's not quite, it's just not quite gelling the way it would have done before. What you do with that then is how the rest of your life unfolds for the next X amount of time. Because when you look at that and you think, well, this isn't really working, but this is, and then you go into the list of the pros and the list of the cons. But I think there's more to making decisions than that. So I did a little bit of research around decision making. So I'd like to just spend a few seconds looking at that, because decision making can be logical. So you can have your list of pros and cons, but decision making can be intuitive as well. Just what does your gut say? What are you feeling? And we are different types of humans. Some of us are more logical driven and some of us are more gut driven. Neither is wrong. They're both valid. And sometimes we need both to help us make good decisions. What do you ladies think about that, just in relation to this topic?
I think there's really valid points. And I think it's also, sometimes it's important to understand what, like you said, what is your primary way of making decisions? And equally, what is your partner's primary way of making decisions? Because sometimes that loneliness can come from just seeing the world from a different place. Like you said, neither are right or wrong. But I think from my experience, one of the aspects that comes up time and time again around should I stay or should I go is actually, before we can even get to the stage where we're making a decision, we need to really be able to identify what the problems are, what problems actually need to be addressed. And very often, I don't know if it's the same with you, clients may come and it can take some number of sessions to even get down. They know they're unhappy. They know that things aren't the way they want it to be, or like you said, they might feel lonely. But when you actually really drill down to what the actual problems they are, that can sometimes be very difficult for them to articulate, because we sometimes get into these sort of ways of just, it becomes normal to exist like that. So when we just think, well, yeah, I know I'm unhappy. I know I don't like this, or this makes me uncomfortable, or whatever you're feeling at that moment in time. But that's the way it's always been. So, and I think when you start recognizing that it doesn't have to be like that, that if you can drive change. Now, whether that change is that you stay or whether that change is that you leave, you don't want to be in the same place you are today. And that's the first decision I feel that any client must make is, do you actually want to change your situation? Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. You can plod along in the way it is, because that is your normal. And what stops us from, I think, from even getting to that point of, do I want things to change, is obviously there's so many factors. There's but all of those factors need to be broken down. What is it that's keeping you from making a decision to choose to change something about your current situation? What are the fears here? What are the issues here? What 101 things are you considering? And let's break these down and determine what are the most important factors here. Because we can, when we're kind of in a state where we're feeling stuck, we're just making excuses. And I know that's a horrible word, but we're making excuses as to why we can't change. So let's just look at these. Is that really true?
Just to pick up on what you said, Claire, intuition, there is a big chance that you have learned to suppress intuition. It is maybe something that has culturally, something that you have never been allowed. It has been maybe a survival strategy that you have learned as a child. And just to pick up on what you said, Salma, is, once we have opened the gate of wanting to step into the future, a different one, going right or left, right? At that point, there's only right or left. I either stay the way I am, and then I should be acknowledging I've decided to stay, or I go left because I'm now in awareness mode and I want to change. But then I think it is really important to then unpack, to go back to what you said, Claire, is, is maybe facts the only thing I need? Or if it is something that has to do with my emotions and intuitions, maybe I have to go a little bit deeper, but I cannot access it because, I've trained myself through different circumstances to really not look there. So maybe there is more self-work done before just leaving a marriage, because are you running away from something, or are you going towards something? That's something I think I quote regularly, because that's what the judge said back in Singapore. Are you just running away, or are you going towards something? And if I go towards something, then it needs to begin with me.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? Yeah.
So you know what, I'm leaving the marriage.
But ignoring your intuition is what we refer to as hindsight, right? Because we're not listening to what's going on, and then afterwards we think, that we have that thought where, actually, I wish I would have done that. There was that moment in time where there was, everything inside us was saying that this needs to change, but we chose to ignore it, and we chose to say, no, you be quiet, because actually, if I follow what you're saying, that opens up a really scary world.
But that's the loss of the well-known, right? But every decision comes with loss. So what was is no longer. So sorry, Claire, you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say, fear is a very, very bad driver for decision making. And so often fear of what might happen if we decided to go causes us to stay.
Yes.
And it keeps us stuck. But if we go, what are my options? Because if you look at if you Google decision making, it's very interesting. It's very strategic in some ways. So you need to identify the problem, as you were saying, or identify the decision that needs to be made. And then you need to get more information.
Yeah.
On all aspects. What are all of the alternatives? And then when you get the information, look at the alternatives, go down each one and go, well, if I did this, what might happen there? And if I did this, so look at the alternatives so that you have a proper range of information in front of you. Then you weigh it up and you think, well, what do I really want? Because now that you have more information and you're not stuck in the fear, you're able to make different choices by way of even looking at something. You think, well, okay, that would give me that, but I don't think I want that. So you have more to work with. And as coaches, what we bring to our clients, if they're in that should I go, should I stay, is who are you? I mean, my first starting point with all my clients is, who are you? Let's pull you out of the marriage and the issue or whatever for the moment, and let's just see, who are you in this world? Because if you have a framework to understand who you are and what drives you and values and all of those things, then you will understand a lot of what your subconscious decision-making process is, because it's driven by our values, even if we're not aware of it. But then the other side of that is we all live in cultures, and there's culturally acceptable things. So Salma, you're from an Asian culture where divorce is not particularly well received in general terms historically. I was married to a church minister, so divorce and Christianity, well, that's a whole hot potato of all sorts of stuff. So when you look at cultural things and think, well, there's an impact of culture on our decision making by way of fear, even if we're not aware of it. I know that as coaches, what we do for our clients is we bring them to a place where we can show them things they can't see. And these are some of the factors in making a decision that they might not be aware of. And when you're able to have a different perspective on something, sometimes the emotional intensity dials down a bit because you begin to understand it. And that is a huge help in being able to figure out what's actually going on. Because sometimes you don't need a decision as yet. You need to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
I know I was like that before I left my marriage. I went to a counsellor 3 years before I left my marriage because I thought, I don't really know what's going on. And I didn't go to fix the marriage. I went to fix me because I thought, what is it that I don't know or don't see that I might be able to help myself with that could then help us? So that was my journey, and everyone's journey is different. But I know that if we don't know who we are in the world, that has an impact in how we move forward and make decisions and how we figure out what we want and don't want and what we do with that.
Mm. Yeah. I love what you just said. You know what? Let's look at you first. I have to admit that I begin differently. So I'm just throwing in an alternative. So I would like to know if they're at that point in their life where they're unsure, they just feel it's very uncomfortable where I'm at, and it's not sustainable to move on like that. I would like to know, why are you sitting in front of me looking at their marriage, looking at their relationship, right? Basically. So we take the very first session for about 2 hours at least, what, the longer the marriage lasted or the relationship, what, how come you're sitting in front of me? Because very often when we are overwhelmed by this doesn't feel uncomfortable, we forget what has been in the past. So it's important to know, how has our relationship unfolded, right? What was at the beginning? How did you meet? Let's say, there were these rose-tinted glasses, but then all of a sudden the relationship started. So basically the falling in love phase is over, and then basically the relationship started. So why are you sitting in front of me with that question, should I stay or should I go? What happened? To also see, this is where we bring in the bird's eye perspective, right? When we just pointing it out, so there seems to have been a pattern, right? So also the decision making is not only going into the future, what would happen if, but also, look and bring in the past, how was it for me then? I might make a decision that includes me, but then I also want to know who was my partner in all this, right? If I maybe want to stay, but then maybe I all of a sudden pick up on patterns that have always been there, but I didn't see them. I didn't want to see it, right? And I love, it's somebody, I don't know, one of my podcasts is, if you want to know what tomorrow or what tomorrow's weather is, look at yesterday's weather, look out of the window, right? But very often, to stay within my control, I cannot change the other partner, right? Maybe I'll have to admit there have been signs, and I chose to ignore that maybe there is something in my partner that doesn't sit well with me. So this is what I'll do, is I'll look at the whole marriage, and then you're sitting across from me most often in Zoom. And why is that? What happened? Right?
Yeah. How did you get to here? And you're right, because there is always good. There is always good, or you wouldn't have got married in the first place.
Right. Exactly. How much do you bring in responsibility, right? Or to learn from this, right? Whether you stay or whether you leave, but there are certainly patterns that are also important to unpack. How do you break the pattern? Or if you want to leave, you no longer want to, repeat, copy, paste in the future relationship. That's what I'll do. What I find really important. That's how I set it up.
If I could just give an alternative perspective, when you just said, Claire, that there must have been some good, that's why you got married in the first place. In the case of an arranged marriage,
just realize that
not necessarily be true.
I take that back. No,
it's not about taking it back. I'm just giving the alternative.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why I love the fact that we all have completely different worlds and backgrounds that we come from.
Yeah, because and this is why I think for me, some the clients that I work with, it's really important sometimes for them to tell me, like you said, when they're here, sometimes they don't have that measuring stick as that you might have had, because especially in the Asian culture, there is no concept of dating before marriage. Even if they have dated, often it's in secret, so they've not had the opportunity to go home and sit across a table with their parents or with a sibling to tell them that this is not a nice relationship, or this is a good relationship. So in reality, when they get married, that is their first experience of being in a close, intimate relationship, and that becomes sort of like, so when I say to them that okay, if you've had relationships before you got married, it's almost like you might have had some awareness of what is good and what is bad, and what you did want, what you didn't want. For a lot of these clients, they don't necessarily have that. They're suddenly in this marriage and they have to work it out as they go along. So these questions come much later when, they've suddenly realized that actually, this is not working for me. There is something making me incredibly unhappy. So you really have to pick like below the surface that, well, tell me what isn't working for you. And very often they don't know because there's nothing to compare it to. It's not like, I just wanted to give a different perspective. That's not, they don't always know, because it's the only relationship that they've been in. So there's nothing to compare it to, unless you're comparing it to, you know, the marriages or the relationships that you have seen, which would be, you know, your parents' relationship, or your uncles, or your older siblings, or whatever. So, but on a personal level,
what do you do with your clients? How do you help them to find what's, you know, where their feelings are coming from? What way do you work? Do you look at values? Do you look at, you know, how do you
values, needs? You know, a lot of the time it's about differentiating. So what, you know, differentiating what is acceptable norms in our culture to, you know, right or wrong. You know, there are certain things within the Asian culture which are acceptable from a cultural perspective, but actually, you know, are not nice ways to behave. So it's really about getting clients to really understand that, okay, but you're right to be upset about that. Right? Just because everybody around you is accepting this behavior, just because everybody else thinks it's normal, if it's not sitting well with you, we need to recognize that first and foremost.
Validating.
Yes, to validate how they're feeling, and to remove, you know, the sense of shame that really exists with, you know, saying even out loud, or even to yourself, that, well, I'm not happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know, I mean, when you're talking about things like that, one of the concepts that I like is the idea of that we all have stories. We all see the world as different stories because of how we're brought up. And one of the complicated factors when you're looking at your marriage or your partnership that's not really working, and I think especially maybe more so in a marriage because of the you know, the vows and all of those sort of things, but it's in both cases, is the idea of what are the stories that your parents are interacting with you with, or your friends or your siblings, because their view on marriage as an entity and their view on, you know, right and wrong is their story. And helping our clients to separate out what is their story versus what are stories of other people that they've taken on board because they don't want to cause upset, or they don't, you know, but those are very real and very big influencing factors a lot of the time in decision-making process. You know, well, I don't want to do this because it's going to upset my mum, or, you know, my mum will never get over this, or my mum has told me she'll be very ashamed if I do this. Those are real influencing factors. And being able to step outside of other people's stories to find what is your story, what is okay for you, which validates the world that you're in, but allows you to make a better decision for you. Because for all the best will in the world, they want what's best with you through the way they see the world, but they're not living behind your closed door. They're not living in your life. They're not living in your shoes. And if you find it hard to articulate for whatever reason, then there's a communication breakdown of somebody wanting what they perceive to be your best is based on not having all the information sometimes. So it's complicated, isn't it?
But it's also about, sorry, Simone, it's also about the definition that you put to that word. Because if we look at, you know, the Asian community in the West, and the parents' definition of what being happy means is very different because of the background that they had. Many of them have come from, you know, incredibly sort of poor backgrounds, who have come here and they've worked incredibly hard to, you know, create a life for them. And so for them, it's about financial safety. It's about, you know, building up your status in the world and having a standing in community. So their definition of happy is very, very different to the definition of somebody else because of the trials that they've had to endure. So, you know, all of this shapes your idea. So, you know, very often, you know, when people say, you know, I had a client recently that said to me, you know, I want to feel as if, you know, we have a really strong bond behind closed doors. And I said to her, okay, so if you were to say that to your husband, or you would say that to me, I have no idea what that actually means. That is just a very broad sentence. Yes. Can you actually tell me what that means in real terms? Like, if I wanted to create a strong bond with you, what would I actually have to do? Because my definition of that would be very different. And you know, she said, and then it took her a while to actually really define in actions what that would mean for her, how she wanted to feel, how she wanted to be treated, how she wanted to sort of not be treated. So I think it's really about, you know, when people come to us and say, should I stay or should I go? I sometimes get the impression that they want us to make that decision for them.
Yes.
It's almost like, well, come on, you can help me, right? You're a divorce coach. Well, no, actually, I can't, because firstly, I don't live that relationship. There's so much more inside a relationship than just what you're able to articulate in a 1 hour session. So it's really much more than that. Only you can make that decision. What we can do is help you break down the things that are stopping you from making that decision. Whether that decision is to stay or to go, that has to be your decision. What we can do is clear all of the overgrowth, basically.
And
like
give different perspectives for you to look at things from in a different way, and ask you questions that you haven't asked yourself, and all of those things. Yeah.
Very often you have asked those questions to yourself, but you've just not answered them.
This is where language comes in, spoken language. I think we're very often so stuck in our brain that very often we do not come to a conclusion because we haven't given our thoughts, which are not in language, an outlet, a
vehicle.
Canvas. Basically to be seen. So I think I cannot tell you how many times I am ruminating. It's just going on and on and on in my brain. And it's only when I articulate them, because somebody gives me the opportunity to now just kind of like take it out of my brain. You know, it looks like a wall, right? And then just sometimes bring it out. What do I mean? You know, but sometimes our brain is so full of buzzwords. I mean, we are living in a time where it's a lot about, you know, what, looking at life positively, and, you know, what, moving on positively, you know, what, Maslow pyramid on top, you know, what, self-actualization. But sometimes what we lack is vocabulary. So I think this is what we bring as coaches, or even
that's exactly what Salma was saying when her client was, you know, I want a deeper connection. Well, what does that mean? And even she had difficulty finding it, because there's this presumption, well, that makes sense, but actually it doesn't make sense, because you're giving somebody this idea of, well, here's the bar, you reach it, but there's no top to the bar. So how will they ever know if they've reached it? Because you haven't given them any parameters. Yeah. And that's a lot of what we bring, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, if we just say, you know what, why don't you just ask yourself, what would be the consequence of staying? What would be the consequence of leaving? To put that into words. And I mean, on all life aspects, life is not only just a marriage. What would be the impact on the family system, on the broader family system, on my job, on my self-being, on my spirituality? You know, what if I, you know what, break out of the church? I mean, it is so much bigger than to just say, I'm in or I'm out. You ask yourself, do I stay or do I leave? And that is not just in, out. You know what? Make yourself be aware. It comes with a consequence, and it comes with loss, because what was is no longer. And if you want to change it, what does it mean? In authentic in arriving in your future, and said, yeah, and that's what you just said, right? I want to make sure that in hindsight, I said, yeah, pat myself on the back. I said, yeah, well done, you.
But also, I think, you know, and Terry Real talks a lot about this, about the, you know, I think what I'm wondering is that even the right question? Should I stay or should I go? Or should we stay or should we go? Because essentially there are two people in this relationship. And you know, one of the questions that I often ask, you know, if someone comes to me and says, you know, I don't know whether I should stay or should I go, it's like, well, what have you done up until now to fix this?
That either has or hasn't worked.
That has or hasn't worked. And or have you just started both building your barriers, stopped communicating because, you know, you don't want the aggro, or you don't want the arguments, or you don't want the, you know, the sort of fear of rejection. So, you know, have you actually, you know, if you've come to this point where you're thinking about leaving, well, what have you done in the sort of build up to this particular meeting to sort of decide whether you are no longer compatible, whether you can no longer work on this? And sometimes, you know, it is about just the breakdown of that communication. Like people, you know, stop talking about things. You know, if they can't find if they can't try to fix something, they'll just stop trying to fix it and just put it aside.
Before, if I can just quickly, I want to get this across before we start.
You have time to go.
Okay, good. I think we should also ask ourselves, what do I know what a relationship is? You know what? Very often we go into a relationship and we don't know. A relationship is ambivalent. You know what? It's kind of like with our children. I love them unconditionally, and sometimes, you know what, they annoy me so much. It's the ambivalence. You know what? I want to be married, and I accept that our marriage has our up and downs, right? You know what? There is a constant tension, and we started bringing in the words gray, I think, in our last episodes. You know what? It is not I'm in love or I'm out of love. It is basically, what does love look like? And yesterday I heard that the Gottman Institute have a new book out there, and Brené Brown talked about it, and it has something to do with the recipe for a relationship. They've done so much research, and I've just downloaded it immediately. I hadn't started it. You know what? I think also, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay in what? Or should I go? What am I leaving behind? Do I know how many go into marriage? And I'm pretty sure we did that too, not knowing what a marriage really is. You know what? We loved each other. You know what? I loved how he looked. He loved how I looked, and we were excited. But I think we haven't really asked ourselves, you know what? How much commitment does a relationship bring? You know, what does it mean to be committed? You know,
what does a healthy relationship look like? You know, if you don't know what something healthy is, how do you measure what you have against, you know? So I'm just conscious of time, and I'm just thinking we need to sort of wrap it up a little bit.
Okay, good. I just wanted to drop that. So that was
Salma, is there anything else you want to put in?
No, please go ahead, Claire.
Okay. So overall, what we're doing is we're looking at the idea, if you're in a position where you're thinking, should I go or should I stay? How do you look at that in a way that enables you to make a really good decision for you in your future? And if you have children, for your children too, actually, because we didn't touch on that within it. One of the things we know to be true is that fear is a very poor driver. So if you're making a decision because you're afraid of what one of the alternatives might be, then surely it's more helpful and a better gift for your future to face that fear and look at it. So look at the alternatives, look at the different options. I loved what you were saying, Simone, of finding what is something healthy that you can compare what you have. Maybe what you have is fairly normal. And maybe what's happened is you just started to find the fault. And once we start looking for one thing, our brains go, oh, I'll find you more of those. And so maybe going back and going, well, what is the good? And can we reclaim that? And the caveat in that is, if you do that, what is your partner going to do? Are they going to want to engage with you? Because if they're not going to engage with you, it takes two people to make a relationship work. One person can't do that on their own. But you will then find that out, which gives you more information in order to make a good decision. And making a good decision is understanding that you make it with the best information you have at the time. So surely if you have invested in a marriage and the wedding and the dress and the money and the everything else, surely it is worth investing at this stage to find out, what do you need to know? What would help you? And who can help you to find that out so that your future is based on good information, good decision-making process, and good, proper, realistic information that's not based on fear. So we leave that with you. We hope you found it helpful. We would love you to hit the like, share, and subscribe button and pass this on to people that might be in this situation, because this is quite real and a lot of people don't talk about it when they're initially thinking like this. But it's a lonely place to be, but especially when you don't talk about it, which is why we wanted to raise it today. So we would love to see you again on another episode on the couch, and stay well and safe in the meantime. Bye.
Bye-bye.